Welcome everyone to our 5th Campus Climate Open Forum. This one's it's our last for the semester, and I want to appreciate a number of people. First, I want to appreciate Tarek McPherson, who's been my partner in pulling these together. Tarek, thank you so much. I want to thank my office staff, who's often organized people, so Mary and Jasmine, and the rest of my group. I also want to acknowledge Timothy Conley, who has, on his own time, been videotaping each and every one of these, and I really appreciate it. It's been wonderful working with you. We have had a number of things to pass out, and I just want to, before I introduce the panelists, I want to just tell you what's around. First of all, we have these little flyers over there, if you haven't picked it up, and it's our open forum feedback mechanism. It's a Facebook page, survey about how these have been for those of you that have come to one or more. Give us some feedback on, and we're not 100% sure whether we're going to continue doing these, but without knowledge, we figured we should ask what other topics we might do next year. We haven't done this. We always had to pick a certain number, and so we did, but there's certainly other topics that could lend themselves to open forums. If you have some ideas about that, please give us feedback, because we'd love to do them. I think they've created some nice dialogue that's been helpful for the overall process in the university. We also prepared, some of the panelists prepared, and I prepared some other things to pass out to help inform tonight. First of all, there is Nadia was helpful in presenting this USC tuition over the years form, you should see. Secondly, I pulled off of the USC website a 3-page document on the cost and value of a USC education, which I think is very useful. Joshua Gray provided this article, which is for you on white privilege, unpacking the invisible knapsack, which I think is very useful. It's one of those chief education specialists in the country that writes on this. And then finally, this week, the provost, Michael Quick, put a new memo out just yesterday, kind of outlining the things that have been accomplished this year. And putting them all in one document. And so I thought this was very useful. It's important, I think, to take a look at each of those so that everyone sort of knows where we're at this point as we're approaching the end of the semester and the end of the academic year. And we can certainly make reference to that as we continue our discussion. Today we have 4 panelists, and let me just remind you, if you haven't been here, but I think almost everybody has been to at least one of these, but I will just remind you, we try to make sure that this is a very free and open discussion where it's a safe space to present things, and we're respectful of each other's opinions, and we want to try to create a dialogue on some of these pressing issues. So please keep that in mind. We have had 4 panelists give short presentations, hopefully about 5 minutes each, to kind of prompt then a wider discussion where we open it up to everyone to ask questions and make comments, and that's the same way we'll proceed tonight. So we have 4 panelists, and I want to introduce them all now, and then we'll come up one by one. The first will be undergraduate, Nadia Barlera. Nadia's a junior English major, a member of the Student Coalition Against Labor Exploitation and the College Affordability Coalition. She was in residential student government last year and served as the advocacy chair for her building government. She's also the student coordinator for Visions and Voices, USC's Arts and Humanities Initiative. After her, I'm going to ask for Catherine Harrington. Catherine became Vice President of Admissions and Planning in August 2010, having previously served as the Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid since 2005. As Vice President, she provides oversight for USC's enrollment activities, including admissions, financial aid, academic records, and the registrar. She works closely with the Provost and others on budget and planning related to tuition revenue, retention and financial aid, and with academic units to continue the improvement of retention and graduation rates. She holds academic appointments in the USC Marshall School of Business and in USC's Dornside College. Our third speaker will be Sarah Pratt. She's the Vice Provost for Graduate Programs. She oversees the USC Graduate School, which has administrative responsibility for all the university's PhD programs and select master's programs. She's a professor of Slavic languages and literatures who came to USC from Oberlin College in 1980. From 1997 until 2005, she served as the Dean of Academic Programs for USC Dornside College of Letters, Arts, and Sciences with responsibility for graduate and undergraduate programs. And then our final speaker will be Joshua L. Gray, who's a doctoral candidate in the Epstein Industrial and Systems Engineering Department. He's also a certification student in the Viterbi School for Health, Technology, and Engineering program. And he's also been the graduate advocate in the Graduate School for Diversity Outreach and Professional Development. Okay, let's start with Nadia.
Should I just talk?
Yeah, just use the mic, or you can come up here, whatever you feel most comfortable. There's a button somewhere.
Hello? Okay. Hi, I'm Nadia. So I would just like to give a few anecdotes. So I have a friend who I met freshman year. She was pre-med and she wanted to study abroad and work with kids, and then right before sophomore year, her financial aid situation changed because her sister graduated from law school, or decided to go to law school, graduated from college, decided to go to law school. She's one of 5 siblings. But USC doesn't take into consideration things like siblings loans or graduate school costs. So her estimated family contribution was actually much higher than she could afford to pay. So she dropped out. And I saw her when I went back to Chicago. She's working as a waitress, which is fine. You know, she's doing okay. But she doesn't know if she's going to go back to school. I have another friend who was double majoring in theater and political science. And then his sister graduated from college, so his estimated family contribution went way up. But his sister's still paying off loans. His parents are saving up for retirement. They have consumer debt. They're saving up to pay for 2 younger siblings. They were unable to acquire the Parent Plus loan because of bad credit, because their house had been foreclosed a few years earlier and it was still on their credit report. And I believe USC doesn't take into consideration consumer debt. So he dropped his theater major so he could graduate a year early. I have another friend who eats 1 meal a day so she can save up to buy supplies, school supplies. I have another friend whose parents cut down on things like doctor's appointments and food so they can afford his education. And I have another friend who works 3 jobs and still does well in a rigorous major and finds time to be an advocate for these issues. Not to mention all the students whose stories we don't hear because they either don't apply because they're misinformed or they forego their admission to USC because they can't afford it even after financial aid estimates. For example, undocumented students and other marginalized communities. So I'm not a numbers person or a financial expert, but I understand the importance of these stories. I think that, you know, a lot of universities say they provide X amount of financial aid or they support 100% of need, which I'm grateful for, believe me. But I think a lot of times we forget that behind every payment there's a story. And USC often shows a lack of concern for the student experience, which was epitomized recently in an unexplained tuition hike. Financial issues affect everyone, and they're often invisible. You don't know if the person sitting next to you is thinking about whether they can eat dinner tonight, or whether they can pay rent at the end of the month, or whether they can come back to USC next year. And this is about access to education. When tuition changes or financial aid changes, students have to take more loans, get another job, drop out. And that reduces access to education to marginalized communities. So that's all I have.
First, I wanted to say to George and to Tara and to all of you, thanks for inviting me to this forum. I want to share some information with you about how we go about recruiting undergraduate students, and specifically how we go about recruiting undergraduate students who are underrepresented in higher education. I also want to share with you a little bit of information about what USC looks like right now in terms of ethnic diversity. And I hope that I will continue to hear a lot, as we've heard from Nadia, about your concerns and your experiences so that I can take all of that learning back and improve the way we do both recruiting and enrolling students, as well as managing the process of financial aid. But before I go there, I want to say one thing. In my work, whether it's in financial aid or in enrollment, numbers are important. They're the things that we can compare to other numbers and to know how we're doing. But numbers cannot in any way fully define the challenges that we face. The numbers are not the stories and the personal experiences that you're talking about. Numbers are important, and there's always more work to do, but they do not define the challenges we face in this journey to create a more diverse and inclusive, in this case we're talking tonight about student community that is characterized by mutual respect and understanding. So we also need to be, I know, attentive to the tone and tenor of our relationships, attentive to the personal stories, attentive to the experiences. So I am going to talk a little bit about some numbers, but I want you to know that I know that's not all there is. And I would not for a moment suggest that that is the case, or want to be misunderstood in thinking that that is the case, because of course I know it's not. We have 40 admission officers who help us recruit undergraduate students. 20% of them are Hispanic, 15% of them are Black. 50% of them went to USC as an undergrad or as a graduate student. The other 50% of them did not. They went to school somewhere else. These folks visit 2,200 high schools in all 50 states and in 15 different countries, telling the USC story and helping prospective undergraduate students understand the story so they can make a decision about whether or not they want to apply. About 25 to 27% of the high schools we visit are majority minority schools and or schools that are majority low socioeconomic status. And underrepresented minority enrollment is an important part of what we look at as we look at those 7,000 high schools all over the United States and decide which schools we are going to visit. To help you calibrate what we do in terms of visiting high schools, the most high schools I know of that any other college or university visits is in the hundreds. And indeed, 7 years ago, we were visiting about 600 or 650 high schools. But we believe that finding the best match for students, to find the best match for themselves and for us, to help the university find students who best fit, who will most flourish at USC. And it's about building relationships. And so we get out there into the high schools every year, often every semester. We have a variety of initiatives and work that we do to support our recruitment of students who are underrepresented in higher education. We have no early decision program or early action program. There's an enormous amount of literature as well as anecdotal evidence that tells us that early decision and early action programs favor students who are privileged economically, socially, politically, and do not favor, in fact, have a chilling effect on colleges and universities' ability to enroll students of low socioeconomic status, students who are underrepresented in higher education, because a student must commit to a college before they've received their financial aid package. And so they are making that commitment in the absence of full information. We don't do that. We purchase about 40,000 names of high-achieving, underrepresented minority students, high-achieving in terms of their standardized tests, from the College Board every year. So I'm spending tens of thousands of dollars every year going out and buying information, because it's the College Board and ACT who know how it is that students have performed. And we target those students with phone campaigns, with email campaigns, with informational campaigns throughout the recruitment process. We have liberal fee waivers for students who cannot afford the application fee. We waive over $1 million in application fees every year. We have something called the Junior Day in May, which is targeted at juniors in high school who will be seniors after the summer, and their parents. It's basically a mini open house in late May with speakers and campus tours and visits to cultural centers and visits with students, etc. We work very closely with NAI. We work very closely with Questbridge. We work closely with TRIO programs for information sessions and tours. We partner closely with our USC cultural centers and alumni associations through the admission process. And once students are admitted, which happened just a few weeks ago, we target very, I will say, aggressive conversion efforts to underrepresented minority students who have been admitted to USC with phone and email, with a multicultural coffee hour at all of the Scholarship Explore events, during regular Explore events, tours of the multicultural centers, a multicultural breakfast at the open house, which will occur this Sunday. There's about 3,500 people that we're expecting on campus this Sunday, admitted students and their families. I expect over 500 people to be at that multicultural breakfast. We have instituted something just this year where we give travel vouchers to students and families who say that they cannot afford to come to visit campus for the Explore in the spring, to help them make their decision. And we are giving travel vouchers now to make it possible for families who couldn't otherwise afford to come to California to see the campus and be a part of one of those events. We've had over 1,000 students and parents this year at those events. We talk a little bit about financial aid. Let me say first about financial aid. USC is an expensive place. And although we give away a lot of money in pure dollar terms, we're a very big place, and we are not as wealthy as many of our competitors, and we cannot do what some of those schools can do, which is why we are working so hard to raise more money for scholarships and grants. But we have a long way to go in that regard. USC gives away to undergraduate students every year about $300 million of USC's money. 80% of our need-based awards are in the form of gift aid. 2/3 of USC undergraduates receive some form of aid. I worked my way through college. I'm first generation. I'm so old there weren't loans. George has read about that. He's not quite as old as I am, but he's read books about it. I know that how much money USC gives away doesn't mean a lot if you're working 2 or 2.5 jobs. I get that. Our average need-based gift is $32,000. Comparatively speaking, Stanford, which is about 10 times as wealthy on a per-student basis as USC, its average gift is $41,000. I'm not holding back money money that I have to make it harder for people, and we know as an institution that we need to work very, very hard, both to keep the rise in tuition down as low as possible, and also to raise more money to fund financial aid. Let me tell you finally, just in closing, what USC looked like ethnically in 1996. I was going to do 96 to 16, but of course those data aren't finalized. The data that are on the web are 2013. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what USC looked like in 96 and 17 years later in 2013. In 1996, we were 44% white. And if we combine, I can make the detailed data available, but I just don't want to put everybody to sleep. If we combine all of the underrepresented minority students, we were 16.7% students of color, Native American. Okay, so 44 and 16.7 in 1996. In 2013, we were 34% white and 21% underrepresented students. That's not victory, but it's progress, in my view, in the right direction. And I look forward to your input and your stories and all that you can help me learn from your own experiences so that I can do everything in the world in my power to make all of this better.
My thinking is organized around 4 questions, and it's primarily focused on graduate programs because that's my job, but some of it is also, a fair amount of it is also relevant more broadly. And so the first question is, are we where we want to be? And the answer is absolutely not. We are not where we want to be. In terms of PhD students, what we've seen so I've been in this job since 2010, and for as far back as I can get data, which is a little bit before that, we have had in our PhD programs 8% underrepresented students. And what's interesting in it, it goes up by maybe 0.5%, down by 0.5%, and it changes where the change is so that some programs feel changes more starkly. But in terms of university-wide data, it just sort of chugs along like that. So we need to build a more diverse faculty, to attract and mentor more diverse students, PhD students in particular, but across the board, but I'm thinking about PhDs. And then those students will get their doctorates, and they'll go out and do things in the world, some in academia, some not in academia. And then they will attract and mentor more students to follow them. It's a cycle that we need to get a hold of that. We need to get that thing going. And to be honest, so far we haven't. And to be further honest, I go to a number of national meetings of graduate deans, and I see relatively few places that have managed to get that cycle going in a really vigorous way. This is I would say it's a national problem. But we have every reason to grab this thing and really push it. Second question, do we know where we want to be? And I would say the answer to that is yes. We see this group We see the Provost's Diversity Task Force. We see the Provost Diversity Advisory Council. And in the graduate school, we have the Graduate School Advisory Council, of which Josh is a member. It includes students, faculty, and staff. I would argue it's one of our most diverse groups on campus in terms of people's roles in the university and what they do. Also ethnicity, also gender, also all those factors that we look at in terms of diversity. It's a very healthy, robust group that represents almost everything we can think of about USC. And we have that group has task forces. We have had a diversity task force going for 2 years that has worked just like dogs and come up with recommendations and things. And that, I think, all of this and all the other groups, many, many private conversations and group conversations and the academic senate and the graduate student government, undergraduate student government, all these things have created a dynamic shared vision of the kind of inclusive, diverse, accessible place USC can be. And I really do think we don't have every single detail, and we won't, and we shouldn't, right? We would be locking ourselves in. But we have a general idea of this dynamic, healthy, thriving place that we can be. Third question, do we have a map of where we want to go? And furthermore, do we have ways? Do we have the app that gives us the zigs and zags if we run into traffic over here? Do we have enough thinking that says, okay, if that doesn't work, try this route, try that route. We know we need to get there, but how are we going to do it? And I would say the answer to that is, for the most part, yes. In terms of graduate students, we have the DIA initiative, Diversity, Inclusion, Access initiative, that has three major aspects. One is simply money. It's top-offs, and money is important. It's top-offs for diverse graduate students. And these top-offs are very, I would say, simple to use. They put the power in the hands of the programs who are recruiting the students, who know who will thrive in their own programs. So we have the top-offs, and they will, along with the Provost Fellowship top-offs, they will be the highest awards for PhD students offered by this university. They are serious. They're not, they're not 20 cents and here, have a cup of coffee on us and we're swell. They are very serious. They keep the stipend at that high level for the full term of the package. For most programs, that's 5 years. So it's a very serious thing. Second thing we can do centrally, and all of this is jointly with schools and with programs. We are a team. Nobody exists separately, and the provost is not our big daddy with the deep pockets, right? Schools share with the provost office in terms of figuring out how to spend the money that there is. One of the things we can do centrally is expand the pool and make sure that as many eligible underrepresented students as possible know that USC is possible. And so we have been working with 3 minority institutions, local, that are interested in working with USC. This would be Loyola Marymount, minority serving institutions is the term. Loyola Marymount, Cal State LA, and Cal Poly Pomona are the ones we have agreements with so far. What was really interesting when we have met with the presidents and provosts and then groups of faculty and students in each of these places. And what was interesting to me is we heard, and I should have known this, that the students and even the faculty think their students can only go to Cal States or the UCs. They think, oh, USC is private, it's so expensive, etc., etc. What you may know, and if you don't know this, you should know, if you're a PhD student at a strong research institution, most likely you are paid, right? Your tuition will be covered and you receive a stipend. So a number of the students, and even some of the faculty didn't know this or thought that USC was, you know, a big gorilla, let's put it that way, a big educational gorilla. So it has been really useful working with these colleagues to just set the record straight, say, here's the information. And one of, I think, the most heartening things we've seen is that the last diversity social last semester, in which Josh was instrumental, we had it was the biggest ever, and we had a faculty member and a group of students from Cal State LA who came. We're having another one in 2 weeks, right? Is that when it is? And we have really grabbed that bull by the horns. I actually expect that one to be still bigger. We also have a summer jumpstart program for which these students are eligible. We, thanks to graduate admissions under Catherine, will waive application fees for students who come through these programs. The Jumpstart places students in a lab or working with a faculty member, so they get a sense of what it's like working at the PhD level. And also, this is not entirely selfless, let me tell you. It's our faculty that get to know these students and say, whoa, this person really knows how to function in this environment and can do this good collaborative work with my current students and postdocs or whatever. So it is for everybody's benefit that we do this. And the students get some stipend. It's not huge, but it's enough to help make their time worthwhile. And we have various kinds of academic support then. During the semester, we have what we call boosters, Jumpstart boosters. We also have at the end of the summer a boot camp for students who will be applying for big external fellowships. NSF is the primary supplier of this. You get an NSF fellowship, and these are available in STEM fields, as you would imagine, plus a number of social science fields. We had the first one in sociology this year. We had one in communication. So they're fields you wouldn't expect. They will now be, that stipend will be at $34,000 for 3 years. The graduate school will top you off for the other remaining years in your package, so you're not going to take it in the teeth when that runs out. And that marks you. It's the saying that fellowships beget fellowships, or money begets money. That marks you for the rest of your career, even not in academia, because that is a nationwide panel of very hard-nosed people who say, this one's good, this person knows how to get stuff done. So our job centrally, what we can do, I cannot be a faculty member for a biology student, but I can supply folks who can help shape the personal statement, help demystify the ins and outs, and that, you know, it's like your taxes, sort of. You look at it and you go, oh, I can't figure this out. But if you have somebody working with you, or TurboTax perhaps, it says, here's what you put here, and this is the kind of statement you need there. And then we have peer-to-peer work, and including mentoring from students who then the year before, 2 years before, who have gotten these fellowships. So there is this idea of I call it the great cycle of mentoring, where it goes from faculty to postdocs, to PhD students, to younger PhD students, to undergraduates, to the neighborhood academic initiative, and then we loop it back up. But That's something really important in this whole cycle. So that's question number 3. Last question is this, and in some ways this is the most important. Have we established the connections? Have we found the words that will allow us to keep pushing forward, keep working together, exploring options, finding the best solutions, rejecting the things that don't work, right? This is all an experiment. And we will sometimes go up blind alleys. That's why we need waves. We will go up blind alleys and say, oh, this one doesn't work. And then we'll get together and we'll talk and say, okay, what do we do instead of this? You know, what will get us closer to our goal when something doesn't work? And so I think that this program and the other ones I mentioned, I mean, that I perceive this community, the university community, and thanks to hard work by many, many people, many, many organizations, I think we have found ways of talking to each other. I think we've seen that there is the political will to make stuff happen. That memo from the provost just goes bing, 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 here are all these things. Those are not, some of them are a done deal, but most of them are work in progress. And it's going to take us and our ability to talk to each other and just keep pushing on these things. It's going to take us to make those things happen. But I think it's a qualified yes, but it is substantively a yes. And so I look forward, I thank the folks who organized this, and I look forward in the areas that I work on to working with all of you and really pushing this thing forward. We must do it, and there's just no doubt we must do it. Thank you.
I've had an opportunity to work with a number of the faculty members as well as the administration and staff on collecting this data as well as analyzing lots of information. We've had a number of focus groups as well as surveys to collect information. And you know, we took a mixed methods approach because we don't want to just look at the data. We want to also acknowledge the stories of students who have had experience at USC in these areas, especially those who are underrepresented minorities, who oftentimes feel as if they are the only ones in their environment. And it's a beyond the feeling of being feeling lonely, feeling as if you're the only means that you are dealing with yeah, let's do it that way. All right. We've had the opportunity to tell their stories to students, but haven't had the opportunity to tell their stories to administration in the past. So appreciate the opportunity of the administration, especially Dr. Ainsley, to speak on these topics. Wish more students were here today, but we have had tremendous student participation in the past. So I'm a PhD student or candidate in my last year of the ISE or Industrial Systems Engineering program. I've been working with Dr. Pratt, as I've mentioned, to look at a number of areas of diversity. So at current state, we have a restricted amount of information. As far as gender, we're binomial at this point. Engineering terms, 0, 1, yes or no. That's an opportunity for us to expand the data that we collect to begin to collect data on transgender as well as LGBT. Currently, we don't collect that information, so that's an opportunity for us. The good news is, when we look at our binomial data, we'll see that we have surpassed the national average of 50% U.S. Census population when it comes to female gender. We've done tremendous with gender diversity. So I want to put this out there and lay it on the line to say that at the undergraduate level, we meet US average. At the graduate level, we surpass the US average with 54%. The US average is about 50.8%. So the focus there and the success there in the funding as well as the efforts have been succeeding. Now let's talk about ethnic diversity.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yes. Mhm.
I know or I think I know the data about Viterbi at the undergraduate level.
Yep.
Is Viterbi doing as well or nearly as well with women at the graduate level as they are with women at the undergraduate level?
We are, by volume, Viterbi has the most females enrolled in graduate programs just by nature of the fact that we have over 5,000 graduate students. Percentage-wise, we have a while to go on the graduate level. On the undergraduate level,
Undergraduate level is about 38%.
we have surpassed the national average. And we'll give the caveat that these numbers will be compared to the US Census, not the school or academic average across the board, with the mandate coming from our provost that we don't want to steal candidates from other schools or universities, but we want to create new. So this is looking at how many candidates or students are we producing, or do we have the opportunity to produce? This is a conversation of opportunity, not
So this is the pipeline conversation?
this is the pipeline and opportunity conversation. And this is not to say anyone's wrong or right, but this conversation is about filling the gap. So
Thank you, that's very helpful.
we fill the gap gender-wise. So and this is a conversation that I've had within the graduate school, that we often pat ourselves on the back of the progress we've made with gender diversity. It's time to move forward. Ethnic diversity. Undergraduate level. Doing great with Asian Americans. Fantastic with non-Americans. On par. Pacific Islanders, there's opportunity. Multiracial, we're doing great. Indian American and African American. Tremendous opportunity. When it comes to enrollment and the comparison of the US population. Now the question might arise, do we want to compare ourselves to the US population or the global population? We are a United States institution. I've worked for many multinational corporations, including General Electric, American International Group, as well as many federal entities. It is imperative that we compare ourselves as a U.S. institution to the U.S. population. Questions?
I was just going to ask, what is your thinking about looking also comparatively at the representation of all of these ethnicities in higher education in America?
We can.
Is that in your mind, is that a valid?
That is a huge.
It doesn't speak to filling the gap, right? But it does.
It's another benchmark that we can compare ourselves to now that we have the data to do that comparison, especially with those that we call our aspirational institutions, I'll say.
Like maybe the AAUs.
Yep, exactly. So it's an opportunity to choose our benchmark. This is one benchmark. We can
Very interesting.
align or disalign with it, but at the end of the day, this is one benchmark. Coming from a student with 25% assistantship, preparing a dissertation, getting ready to graduate. So this is what you get for a few more semesters. Now, or a few more weeks. Now, when we look at the graduate ethnicity, same areas of opportunity. We're doing better with the Pacific Islanders. You'll see, so with this in mind, I will say we're doing better in the graduate population with the Pacific Islanders, but we have so much, as well as the African Americans with 63% compared to, or 6% compared to 4% with the undergraduate population. So I'm saying we make progress if we look at our Hispanic population at the graduate level, much stronger at the 13%, and these are estimates based on a report generated from the strategic planning report that was provided. Just adding a little more color in comparison. So when we talk about academic enrollment, what I'm bringing up here, again, I'm an engineer, industrial systems engineer. We're talking about Pareto, the 40 or the 80-20 rule. What are the 80% of the enrollment or students enrolled compared to 20% of the population? So we get to this point here, and this is, we'll talk all the way up until cinematic arts, but Dornside, first and foremost, has the most students. Then we get into Viterbi, Marshall, social work, and then we begin to flatten out below, say, 20%, but we're at about 20% all the way up until Annenberg. So justification for focus, I'm trying to narrow our scope here. We've narrowed it from LGBT, disability, gender. All we have is data on is gender and ethnicity. From gender and ethnicity, we have data on these specific schools to focus on. Because at the end of the day, Catherine, you can work your butt off, but when it comes to graduate enrollment,
I'm trying to get rid of myself.
when it comes to graduate enrollment, it's at the discretion of the schools.
Absolutely.
And the same to Sally, who I commend, appreciate, and acknowledge for the efforts and progress that have been made thus far when it comes to graduate diversity. But at the end of the day, it falls on the schools, the diversity liaison. And this is the pipeline for faculty. So here I want to look at gaps. And I think this is very important.
I was just wondering, because this is a forum, I was wondering if we could stop interrupting you until you finish.
Oh yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Okay. So we've got USC, USA. Pretty simple, right? Dashed, USA, USC solid line. So what we're doing, color comparison, is greens, we're doing good, red, we need to do better. So when we look at non-Americans, we're doing great. We're on par, we're actually exceeding par. As of 2013, we've exceeded the national average for non-American enrollment at the undergraduate level. Now, when we look at Hispanic enrollment, we have opportunity. National average is about 17%. We're slightly over 13%, say. And I have the solid numbers to share with you as well. The African American gap in opportunity is even larger. We're at about a little less than 5%. National average is about 13%. So this is US population. We can argue where we want to compare ourselves to, but when we talk about generating new talent and opportunity versus stealing it from other places, our comparison is the entire pool, not just those who are going to other universities in these areas. So, last but not least.
But is the entire pool in the United States regardless of age?
Yes, regardless of age.
Okay.
Where we're doing tremendous, Asian Americans. We far exceed the national average, which is fantastic. This is an opportunity for us to provide more support and resources for our Asian American students, because we have a larger percentage given our geographical location on the Pacific Coast. The other area I just wanted to review, non-Americans, when we look at our gap, it's increasing at the graduate level. So, Hispanic Americans, it's narrowing, we're doing much better. When we talk about African Americans, slightly narrowing, we're doing better. Asian Americans, slightly narrowing as well. So the question becomes, and I'll tell you the derivation of this non-American increase within the graduate population of Turkey. Just be honest. Just briefly, you have these slides as well. Jordan Simon, I will commend Dr. Sanchez for all the green up there for him. But the reality is, we've got issues on the West Coast when it comes to the African American population. Hence, the majority, if not all, of the UCs have, based on their campus climate surveys that we have yet, but will apply and collect data on, the African American population is smaller, is more fickle, is endangered, and is in need of support. But overall, if we look at the graduate population and we pull in our American Indians as well as our Pacific Islanders and Hispanic Americans, we see a similar pattern. Just to compare and contrast, and I'll wrap up here. If we look at Viterbi, we have slightly more red. I just want to point out here, Asian American, 24% versus 5%, within, or 27% versus 5% US Census. No Native American Indians in Viterbi. Now, Viterbi has made progress in the gender area, which is where Dean Uortzos and others tout their progress, and they've made progress in that area. The opportunities that come about when you look at non-American, 15% here, great. Non-American, almost 75% versus 13%. So the question becomes, where are we investing for the future of our technology, for the future of our economic stability, as well as the future of our national defense? So with that said, I'll wrap up and allow for questions, because I'm sure that there are questions around this information. Thank you. Apologies for going over time, but I hope you all find it working.
So now this is where we open it up. Are there any questions, comments? I'll entertain them. Mary.
Thanks for sharing the data, Josh. I think that it's important to note that although Asian Americans are doing well by numbers, it's good to preface that data for that population does need to be disaggregated. There are sub-groups that are sorely underrepresented,
Yep.
so I just wanted to note that across the board in terms of just all the information that's shared about that population.
Thank you. And I appreciate that point, because I toggle between the association affiliation between the Pacific Islanders that are more narrow and the Asian population, and I'm still sorting through the definition there, and that's been a question that I've had over the past couple of years. We've been trying to clarify with your former office as well as the Alumni Association. So that's a very valid point, and that's a very valid
And it's just on a national level, right? That's something that a lot of universities just aren't doing properly is sharing the level of data that should be shared about Asian Americans.
So I've got a question. Striking in the figures and striking in what I know is a huge issue is the decline in African American enrollment. Particularly, and let me start with the undergraduates. If there's one population that over time at USC has gone down, it's that population, and that's a struggle. How can we address it? What's the ways in which we can do more to be recruiting a more robust group of African American students? Because what I fear, looking to the future, is that that number will continue to decline at USC. So are there mechanisms, are there things that we should be doing? And I know it's a complex issue, but I'd like to put it, particularly I guess to Catherine, that we're not doing, or is there a new way to approach this issue, which I think is for the undergraduate population the most significant enrollment issue?
George, I'll tell you, we're breaking our pick on that. We really are. I will say that in 1996 there were 1,550 Black non-Hispanic students enrolled at USC. In 2013 there were 2,139. So the absolute numbers have not moved. And some of that also gets muddled by the change in the federal government, how the federal government's counting it. But the bottom line is, we're not doing as good a job enrolling African American students at the undergraduate level as we are Hispanic students. We also break our pick a little bit on Native American students, although when you look at the percentage of Native American students who are enrolled at USC as part of the total population, it lines up exactly with the percentage of Native American students who are represented in higher education in the United States. It doesn't mean it's enough. I wasn't here for, I watched the part of the video of the first forum when Michael was here. And there was some discussion about recruiting diverse faculty members. And one of the things that you said was, let's remember, when we're recruiting underrepresented faculty, we're competing against Columbia, we're competing against Stanford, we're competing against, now this is not an excuse, but the fact of the matter is, the competition is fierce. I've got people sitting in the backs of churches. I've got people going to, I got a guy here who's Rakeen Hall, who's one of the lead people on this. We have not cracked the code on it. I'm hopeful that things like travel vouchers to get families and students to programs during the spring, 1,000, and we haven't disaggregated that yet, Hispanic, Black, other underrepresented categories, but you would never have 1,000 underrepresented minority admitted seniors and their families come to campus for Explore programs. Never had, we're expecting over 500 at breakfast on Sunday. We're really busting our buttons. But any suggestions, any thoughts, I am absolutely wide open. I also know we've done some things, and let me just talk about them. We've done some things that people have thought, well, why are you doing that? There was a specific program that was an overnight program for admitted underrepresented minority students, and it was the night before the open house every year. Did not make one bit of difference.
Zero.
Over years and years and years in getting more of those students to come. So what I've done is I've taken that money, I've put it into travel vouchers to see if we can do better like that. The Posse program, near and dear to your heart, near and dear to my heart. Posse program did not move the needle. And the foundation has shifted their focus away from low SES and first generation. They're still ethnically looking for underrepresented minority students, but they've shifted away from low SES and first gen. So we're, we continue to deploy that money in scholarships and in programs and in everything, but I'm wide open. Yeah.
That specific program you were referencing, you're talking about the Latino and like African American, like overnight in Somerville and
Yeah.
Latino for it?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in terms of retention, like I was in that program, I think the last year that y'all had it, we were being treated like trash by white students on campus, and like the students that were hosting us were telling us about all the awful things that they had to experience.
Jesus, I'm glad I'm not doing it anymore.
Well, I mean,
Give me their names. I mean it.
I mean, this was, I'm a fifth year, so we're all gone.
I'll find them.
Anyhow, like that doesn't, yeah, I don't think that putting that money into travel vouchers is really going to change the culture of like what has been going on. So I just.
Well, it may not, but if they don't have, if they have fewer hours on campus to be badly treated, and you're getting to something that really troubles me. I look at numbers. That's how I know how Catherine's report card is numbers. And I said this at a meeting a few months ago. George, I don't think you were there. I know Ginger was there, and Tara, I don't know if you were there. But what I said, this was the advisory group and the task force. What I said was, for a while I was looking at these numbers and I was thinking, okay, we got a lot of work to do on African American, a lot of work to do on Native American, but we're moving things. We're moving things in a good direction. It doesn't matter what the numbers are. It matters what the tenor of the community is. It matters how you're treated. It matters what the experience is. I mean, yes, it matters what the numbers are. But more numbers in a lousy environment isn't going to make it a better environment. And that was it's added dimensions to how I view these issues.
Make sure you had your.
I'm here. I'm part of an entrepreneurship program at USC called Blackstone Launchpad, and I meet with different types of students. And for me, I've had students from India, Hispanic students, Chinese students tell me that they don't feel like it's an inclusive environment here, especially with the white students on campus too. So that's why it's important for me to be here. My program welcomes everybody as a community, but it hurts my heart for students I care about to.
It hurts my heart. It's
Go ahead,
unacceptable.
But that's it. But that's why I'm here, and I want to see what I can do to change their minds. In our program, we do a lot of great activities for different types of students, and we have that open environment. But I just want to make sure that while they're here, this is my 6th year of employment at USC, that they don't feel this way. Because in my program, we don't feel that way there, but it's just their general perception when they're telling me that, and I don't know what to do. I need help.
Nadia, you wanted to say something?
Oh, go. No, you have your hand up.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, well, I was just going to add on to the point that one thing we can do is support the Black community on campus, so that 18-year-old Black men aren't accosted by DPS officers on their way to class. I don't know exactly how admissions works, but that's definitely one thing we can do.
To quickly speak on that, I had the opportunity to go, thanks to Varun, to the National Society or National Association of Chief Diversity Officers in higher education. Had the opportunity to meet the Chief Diversity Officer at Harvard. Big difference.
We'll start with
And the African American minds are the same, but as an HBCU, they're the Howard is the Harvard of HBCUs. But had a chance to talk with them as well as Princeton and others. We've done a lot of benchmarking with Princeton and other private institutions because public institutions, to be honest, are far more progressive than us. The UCs are making more progress. At the end of the day, it's about the culture and the feeling. So MIT has best practices when it comes to African Americans in STEM. MIT also has a place that is nationally, if not internationally known as Chocolate City.
As well?
Chocolate City.
That's what I thought you said.
Chocolate City. Not in DC, where Howard is. It's in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And Chocolate City is the dorm where the majority of the African Americans within the #1 STEM education program reside. We have a floor recently that's in debate, and it sounds like people don't feel welcome there. But it's a thing of gauging the desires of the students through campus climate surveys and employing the wisdom of non-privileged administrators who have the experience comparable to those students and can empathize with not just words, but contributions, such as
From their own
funding.
experience.
Such as funding, or really at the end of the day, fight for the funding. Because at the end of the day, there's tons of funding from the federal government, as well as non-for-profit organizations that are available that we're not pursuing, that's available specifically for this topic. Now, I will commend the graduate school. Over the past year, we have moved in the direction of pursuing that funding. I think that there is the opportunity for other components and to partner with the graduate school as well as to independently go after this federally funded African American president created opportunities that we're not going after today.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's kind of looking at it in two different ways. It's one thing to build a community, and it's one thing to create a community. We can find 1,000 students, we can host overnights, we can do breakfasts, we can have giveaways. But if their reception upon coming here is cold, all the work that we do over 7 to 8 months is for nothing. And so I think to answer your question, as far as an admissions officer under Catherine's leadership, we're taught to be fluid. At the time, the overnight was a great idea. It had been dormant for 8 years. It was my second year here. The students really wanted it to happen because in essence, they wanted to create a community. I think in the initial birth of that, that's what we saw in the early phases, the first 2 or 3 years. Towards the end of the overnight, when you came, we saw the fallout, more or less the flip side of that coin. For all the energy in this room, for all the good intention in this room, when it comes time to get student volunteers, student hosts, students to, be good stewards of the campus, keeping their guests safe, I did not sleep the night of the overnights, only to be here the very next morning at 6 a.m. for an admitted student breakfast. And so I think with respect to intentionality and how we move forward, we really have to see it through that lens. If we do all of the good work to get them here, and your team does all the good work to welcome them and keep them here, let's talk more about building a community. We often talk about the issues of admissions as a recruitment problem. It might be more of a yield retention issue as far as getting them to the gates and making them survive. So
That's why I said, give me the names.
Exactly.
I'm gonna go
Exactly.
snap.
Well, and Catherine, to be honest,
I'm serious.
the nights of the overnight, John Millette and I, we are everywhere.
Honey, I know.
Everywhere.
I
And
know.
there were kids, who their host didn't show up. I'm here till 1 o'clock in the morning standing next to this kid, calling every kid I know on campus that I have a personal relationship with. Can you take one more student, please?
Yeah, but that's
Okay,
nobody's
so let me just get some other Sabrina.
So I'm a student that was courted by USC. I'm what you're referring to as high achieving, low income first gen student of color. I fit all of it. I was given merit scholarship. I did explore. I did the breakfast. I was genuinely courted. The chair of my department called me. I understand. And
I asked them to do that. They don't always, but I'm.
Yeah, and that's why I came here over Berkeley and a great package I had there. So I do understand how much work goes into this, and when you say at the beginning you're here to essentially learn how to do better, I can speak to that because I'm the one that got here and I know exactly what's going on. So there are a few things. Someone does a quick Wikipedia search of traveler, the horse, the Confederate horse, they may feel uncomfortable if maybe they're black or brown because the Confederacy wasn't very kind to our people. So the fact that there's our mascot that's touted is, for whatever reason, a Confederate horse. California was barely a state at the time. I don't quite understand how that happened, but when they see that, and it's very accessible information, they may not want to come to this university because they see its roots in racism. Beyond that, if they find out a former president was actually eugenicist, they find out we have some trees that were gifts from the Nazis. Again, more students that are essentially coming from my background won't want to come here. And beyond that, when they see a price tag at an institution that exceeds any other, especially if they are choosing amongst top tier schools, as I was when I was coming here, they will not want to come. And that's me speaking on behalf of a low income student perspective. The reason that I kind of went past that was because I got a letter saying I had merit scholarship, so for my 4 years it was guaranteed even if tuition went up. So I figured, okay, still financially it has been real tricky with me, but it doesn't, essentially that was the thing for me. That is not the case for every student thinking to come here. And when we have a price tag that's constantly going up and it's now exceeding any other institution that we really can't even compare ourselves to academically, we will not have those top tier students, and we will not have those students of color, we will not have those SES students as we call them. So in terms of ways to improve, I think those are a few.
Thank you very much.
As someone who didn't go here for undergrad because of financial aid reasons, I don't know if this is still a policy because I applied like 10 years ago, but I know a barrier for me had to do with divorced parents. They required both parents' information when I didn't have one parent's information because that person was not in my life. So I think that might
Thank you.
also be
As a product of a divorced family, I'm acutely aware of the issues around non-custodial parents. We have only changed that last year. But thank you for bringing it up. It's enormously important.
One other quick comment. I think that, and I've been a part of these forums and the advisory board for a period of time, and I've seen student participation trickle away as a result of, I'll just say, neglect from administration. Not just listening. Listening is fine. Having discussions is fine. But taking actions and putting money where your mouth is what leads people to believe in this institution. And I've stated on camera in the past that I commend Dr. Ainsley Carey, as well as Dr. Junior Clark from Sony, and George Sanchez, as well as fellow panelists, for actually being present in these conversations. We had Michael Quick at the first open forum. From my understanding, wasn't too pleased with the frustration and anger that students were expressing. But there has to be platforms.
That's actually not true. I have emails from him saying he was quite pleased with that discussion.
I hope so. I hope so.
I mean, I don't want to have misrepresented on camera his response.
What? Okay, valid point. I will say we have not seen him since.
We haven't invited him since. But
I believe that we have.
we invited him to one. And he
He's
has come.
invited to every event, whether the invitation is formally delivered or informally.
They're his form.
As well as the task force and everything.
So I just want to say, I do acknowledge him for being here, but my point is that the lack of involvement and the lack of symbolic focus and commitment speaks to the lack of student participation and commitment to this, to a certain extent, going forward when it comes to student involvement outside of their own coursework when other students in it are invited. Because I've been asked to be the poster for Viterbi many times, and I have been out on the road. But at this point, I refuse to continue to want to be seen but not heard. And I'll leave it at that.
One of the things I wanted to acknowledge and to ask a question about is one of the things that we made progress in this semester is transparency. So I've been looking at that data, which is new, which we've just gotten. And there's some interesting things that for me, I'd like us to break down. So here's where we can get into specifics, because part of the reason that we want transparent data is to actually look at it and then to say, wait, there's different issues at work. And that's why I raised the African American issue first. Let me turn to the Latino data or the Hispanic data, because to me there's a different issue at work there. You know, as Joshua mentioned, the numbers have been improving. The population is obviously large. You can put that in the context of California if you want and say it should be large, whatever. But I'm less concerned about that and more concerned about the stark difference between the numbers of students and the numbers of faculty, specifically with the Latino population. We have close to 2,500 undergraduates and close to 2,800 graduate students. Those are fairly significant. They're not insignificant. But there is a total of 40 tenured Latino faculty at USC. And I know this week we lost 2. Okay? So when I'm operating in that realm, I think about this as a climate issue, which is the difference between the number of students and the number of faculty. And if I was to point out one issue, and again, I didn't have that data until that data was made transparent. So, you know, I kept thinking, well, I know what the numbers are in Durham. I don't know what they are university-wide. That to me is a shocking disparity for USC, and it's a climate issue. So, I mean, we can talk
the issue of building community.
Exactly. So I want to encourage everybody to actually look at the data, because the data will point us for different communities in different directions.
Correct.
Which is where we have to have the conversation going. If the faculty issue for Latinos is like, it just speaks to a huge climate issue. There's just not enough faculty for the number of students that we have. And of course, I know all the things. It's not exactly all Latino faculty we're looking out. All those caveats.
But it's still not enough.
But it's an incredible disparity, right? So I would like us to actually start using some of the data that we've now pushed to make transparent to actually get at the climate issues, because the climate issues, I think, are profound, right? And that's one that just speaks up to me, right? Which is that, oh my God, that's an issue, you know, now I know why I'm tired all the frickin' time, right? And why a lot of Latino faculty are tired, because the number of students that we're asked to be role models for, mentor, that sort of thing across all kinds, it's just profound at USC, right? And it is very specific, not exclusive, but very specific in that community when you look at those numbers, right? So I'd like us to kind of push forward collectively at looking at the dynamics in those statistics now, to see what are the exact climate issues.
From a macro level, looking at admissions, I wouldn't expect anybody to want to come to a university if the students that are currently there don't feel comfortable and safe. So I think that when you look at administrations and the future students and trying to get them to come, you have to look at taking care of the students you have now. Because they're the ones that are going to be hosting the future students. They're the ones that are going to have the experiences that are going to post them online that your potential students will be seeing. And they're the ones that are going to be listened to, not administration.
If I could jump in, oh no, go ahead.
Also, I think to just go off of that, to speak on the political climate, like we have Trump who's running for president, and a lot of students on campus, you know, people who live in my building have like Make America Great Again hats on and big Trump signs. And when students come to USC to visit, you know, if I was visiting and I saw that, I would not want to come here, just to say that. You know, I have a lot of problems with the campaign and the things that he's saying personally, but as a student, if I came and said and saw how many students support somebody with those kind of beliefs, I would definitely just throw my acceptance letter out the window.
Just to take a second.
I agree with you. Trump drives me nuts, right? But he's a presidential candidate. Like, what do we as a university do How do we address that?
I think it just is I mean, if somebody is running for president with those beliefs, don't you think that there's a lot of students here with those same beliefs? Especially if they're walking around with signs and hats. You know, that shows that when we say, I feel uncomfortable, maybe there is something behind that.
No, I get why students are not, I get that part. I just don't know.
But that's also like being uncomfortable in America, right?
Right.
You know,
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
so-
But I'm just saying that obviously our
I mean, I hear
campus
you,
is
but-
a reflection of the political climate.
If I could bring it back to your point.
Yeah, one of the things that I would suggest, I mean, for example, there's going to be a series of coordinated programs in the fall semester that I know Dawn touched on the election. And I think it's incredibly important to have as many of those as possible and to have them as open as possible, right? I want people to hear that when Trump speaks, he's offending my parents. He's going after me. It makes me feel uncomfortable. Now, if people don't like that, too bad.
Right.
I need a forum to be able to say that, and I want to hear from other people who are supporting it. I want that public. I want that open. I want people to understand that there are different positions at USC. That's, to me, the important thing. Now, that means that we're going to have, you know, the come fall semester, those are going to have to be very open, very public, and every voice is going to have to be heard. From people who support Trump to people who don't, who find offense. I mean, all of that has to get represented. But it's so important that it's all on the table. Because then the diversity of what is at USC can be expressed. And to me, therefore, it means that we need programming right into it from the get-go. You know,
If I can speak to that, I know for a fact that we have minorities, we have diverse people within our administration and faculty who are both Democrats and Republicans. Aside from the political conversation, going back to your initial question about Latinos and minorities in faculty, part of the reason why we have issues there is the same reason with the students that the young woman mentioned, that, you know, the retention rate is awful with faculty of color and female faculty, but specifically faculty of color, because they're stretched thin. They need to get tenure. I know, for example, I used to work with Dr. Pratt's or Sally's upcoming counterpart, Andrea Hodge, who's going to be vice provost over undergraduate academic programs. When Dr. Slaughter and I initially started working together on Viterbi's Center for Engineering Diversity advisory board, she was active, had personal trauma in her family, but did not have the capacity to pursue tenure, to be a representative of female diversity, also representative of Latino diversity, pulling students. I know one of her students, I used to work with her, trying to get through qualifying exams. At the end of the day, she didn't have the capacity to work on diversity issues. And I doubt will have the opportunity or the capacity to in her new role. And she's very passionate about it, would love to, just as much as you would. But doesn't have that carved out within, you know, her compensation package. And this is one of the conversations I've been having with Associate Provost Camille Rich, is she faces similar situations where, okay, you want me to be associate provost, you want me to be African American female, you want me to be a mentor, you want me to be a professor, you know, what do I do with all this? And the point that I bring up is that USC has been very successful in my mind at growing the gender diversity as a result of the partially a result of the phenomenal Women in Management program that USC has. I often question why there isn't a comparable program for minorities in management. Because I'm sure that the minorities in faculty, as well as administration and staff, as well as students, need just as much mentoring as their female counterparts. And I shouldn't say counterparts, but colleagues. And, you know, people such as Dr. Carey, yourself, and other junior faculty could benefit from that type of structure. But first and foremost, I talk about conferences and stipends. I just went to the National Society of Black Engineers and had to fight for funding for it because the graduate school funding is slim. I understand that. GSG funding, you know, hopefully I'll get it. And then all of a sudden I found out there's a foundation or a fund for women in science and engineering to go to conferences. What about minorities in engineering? You know, what about African Americans or Hispanics in engineering to go to these types of conferences to be able to affiliate with other like-minded engineers? SWE, the Society for Women Engineers, have a philanthropic endowment when it comes to our advancement office to dip into to make the progress that we've made. When it comes to minorities, we have not made as many strides for advancement. I think that the Cinematic Arts donation by Georgia Melanie was phenomenal for cinematic arts, as well as the funding for Annenberg. But these are areas where we're already strong in the social sciences and arts. We need that type of funding when it comes to the STEM disciplines, the life sciences, as well as the physical sciences.
And now let's just kick it out, almost nothing so far.
It's much more than we have on the minority side. But it's a win-win situation. We got another $1 billion to raise. I mean, we've already raised over $100 million from African Americans alone, between Dr. Daughtry and Dr. Dre, I'll just say it. So the money's there, it's go after it. Go ahead.
I wanted to get back to the tuition issue and maybe ask the question, because I think it's possible. Maybe I'm wrong, but this is, I think for me, part of the issue is, can we be more transparent and more forward-thinking? I know the UC campuses, and I know it's a complex situation in each school, is able to put markers that go farther in the future in terms of how tuition will increase or not increase. And it seems as if we're doing this, announcing it on a yearly basis, like this. Is it possible in our system to actually do some predictive thing that is, let's say, 3 years out? So you can kind of predict how tuition is going to rise, or is, even if you have to make adjustments. But because I think one of the problems with the way we're doing it right now is that it does come as a shock, and it comes as something that no one, so we've got to have models that can say, we're going to be on this trajectory unless the economy collapses, unless, there's always caveats. But is there a way of doing that and making it public and transparent?
I think that's a very interesting question. I will personally carry it back. Let's find out. Let's call the question.
Yeah.
I think it's absolutely worth pursuing, and I will personally take it back to my perspective.
Because I think the transparency issue is the first step, is to sort of at least see where are we headed and what do we think is going to happen.
Right.
And if we can get farther along there, then we can have the discussions, the other discussions. Yeah.
So I actually asked for that information in bringing back the University Student Fee Advisory Committee, and I never got it. So this is supposed to be the function of our meetings in January. I asked for the information actually toward the end of October, because that's when the resolution was passed. I needed that in the first week or two of November, because we actually used to have this committee back in 2013 to 2014 when I was still an undergraduate student government. And then that committee magically disappeared. But we used to convene and take a look at what we had 3 years in the past. We have like faculty members there and all that stuff, student, undergraduate, graduate representation. And we looked at, 3 years ahead, and we looked at all these things. We used to have this. So when I came back to graduate student government this year, I noticed it wasn't there. I don't know how many times I can ask for this information before I'm just...
I'm sorry, for point of clarification,
Yes.
This was about student fees or about tuition?
Both, student fees and tuition. We got a hold of
Okay, because
tuition as well.
at least to my knowledge, projecting tuition increases 3 years in the future is not something that this university's ever done.
No. It was only student fees.
Okay.
Student.
I might have missed something. But.
The programming fee and the student center fee. So there were two main fees, and sometimes we would discuss the student health fee.
Understood.
But tuition, there was never a 3-year in the future projection on tuition. We would look at the student fee history, 3 years past, on how the fees grew and how they changed.
So it's student
But those
fees.
are student fees, not tuition.
But it seems like a good idea to kind of talk about how that could happen. I mean, that would seem to address a lot of concerns if there could at least be a model that you would know would likely be the course, right? So,
I was a banker. I mean, I do have a PhD in the humanities, and I didn't really understand those charts, but I understand a little bit about numbers, and I find the financial aid process unnecessarily complicated. Now, in part, we have the federal government to thank for that, but we continue to work very hard to find ways to break through all of that complexity, to be able to communicate with families and prospective families and students and prospective students, and to continue those conversations. And we don't have it right yet. We don't have it right yet. And this may be something that would be helpful.
I've been talking over the last few weeks with a lot of first-generation students about financial inequity once they get to campus. So even if they have, if they're from a low-income family and have a full tuition and fees ride, there's so many unexpected costs on campus once you arrive.
Right.
You know, in my school, students who are having to drop a really coveted admissions to the production program, which, you know, is exceptionally hard to get into because there's so many invisible costs built into being able to be a production student, and no resources within cinema or other places on campus for students who, you know, say they want an opportunity to study abroad or go on a trip that's being advertised somewhere, like what kinds of internal funds are available. And to be more transparent about if there's an availability to address those needs and how that might happen.
It's actually a really interesting point. I'm a student in STEM, so I understand lab fees. And the thing about lab fees is that they're pretty specific to students in STEM. And if we're trying to have more low-income first-gen students to go into the STEM field, as your charts pointed out is very necessary, those are the invisible costs that you're suddenly like, why am I paying a lab fee to take calculus 2? We use paper and pencil. It's because one time you're going to do a MATLAB lab. That's why. And these are exactly things that are preventing people from staying within these majors. It's significantly cheaper to go elsewhere. And following up on that, you mentioned how you work through college, and that's admirable, but when college costs $70,000, you cannot work through college as a student. I have 3 jobs, I get paid over minimum, and I'm only affording rent with that. So these things really aren't fair to people who are low income, because again, I have tuition, but still, with the way things end up working out, I do pay a lot myself, and I can't ask family for it, as many students are in the same situation, or oftentimes worse off than I am. So it really is an infrastructural issue, and the reason why we have to increase tuition so much every year is because we can't afford the cost of the university. I don't see why the burden of that goes on to students when our administration is becoming more top-heavy, and our president is one of the highest paid administrators in the country. I don't entirely see how that allocation of money makes any sense. So the argument that it has to go up to pay for this university really doesn't follow through.
Adding on to what Sabrina was saying and kind of bringing it back to the faculty, we talk a lot about like wanting to increase diversity in our faculty. And it's very difficult to do when our adjunct professors are treated so poorly and are subject to such low wages. And also intimidation and harassment by our administrators. They've actually gone to third parties about harassment from administration. And it's not really an environment that faculty would want to enter if they have students that are unhappy and their peers in the institution are already facing poverty wages and having to get second jobs in coffee shops to work nights to be able to make ends meet.
Sophia?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on what you were saying about how financial aid can be very confusing, but like USC works really hard to kind of cut through that and make it understandable for families. I think that effort that USC puts in for like prospective students, but then once they get here, like all that effort goes completely down the drain. And once students are here, like very little effort is put into like actually making sure that they can continue to afford this university. And I know, like, I have several friends who, yeah, they have great financial aid packages coming in, but their financial aid packages now are completely different. And I have a friend who has to stay another semester, and when she called the financial aid office to have any idea of just like a ballpark idea of like what would happen to her financial aid, all they told her repeatedly was that her scholarship was not going to continue for that extra semester.
If I could just provide a quick personal example or testimony. So my cousin who lives here, my only cousin, started here in undergrad with computer science. Ended up dropping out of the computer science program here because of funding issues. Now, when I went to Florida State undergrad for industrial engineering, my tuition was a grant. And you know, I worked 2 jobs during school, so it was understandable. Now that tuition is 50 grand, that's a whole nother story. And you know, students have to balance going to a state school versus a public school versus a private school. I'm at the point where I'm actually recommending that students go to public schools for undergrad and then pursue private school for graduate education. Both of my graduate degrees are from private institutions, but the reality is, after my cousin dropped out, he went to Cal State Long Beach, got his degree in computer science, is now the vice president of Paramount Pictures in transition to be vice president of Viacom, who owns Paramount Pictures. Had the wonderful opportunity to be alumni here, but couldn't afford it here. Had the intellectual capability, had the interest and the stamina that it takes to get through such a rigorous engineering program, but it's a fact of affordability and value, and not just value of the education for that individual, but the value that USC sees in these individuals with providing them support to not just get in, stay in, but as Sally reminds me often, to get out.
How's your dissertation today?
It's well. I had a meeting on the health science campus yesterday about my research.
Okay.
Okay, it's 9:30, so we promised everybody we would finish up at 9:30. The one point I didn't want to... Yeah, okay.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to clarify for the record. I would like to apologize for my previous statement. We actually only got the past 7 years of tuition increases, and our recommendation from the 13-14 year was to be able to project in the future. And Dr. Carey, I just forwarded you a copy of all the documents. Thank you.
The one point that came up, and we went by really quick, but I just wanted to feature it, because I do think there's something really concrete we can do about it, and that's the issue. I want to put lab fees, textbooks, and student fees, all kind of in a package about both transparency, but also collecting information about them. Because one of the things is I think students should know if they're heading into certain majors or certain courses, what's associated with each. And if we can gather that information in one place, it's also a particular advancement issue, right? If there's outrageous lab fees in certain fields, and that is keeping a set of students from actually taking those courses, then we ought to be able to raise money to deal with those issues. And I think making it transparent is one of the first things to actually then dealing with those issues. And I know textbooks often operate in the same way in some disciplines.
And they're layered, because in cinema, they're lab fees and they're quite high, but the costs these students are talking about are costs once you're in a class that aren't even covered by the lab fees. So there's a kind of unspoken expectation that you'd have an extra $1,000 laying around to work on your production, right? And that has got to be known from the start.
So shining a light on it and making sure that it's tallied in a central place and making it available to everyone, I think is one of the ways of dealing with it, right? And trying to make the costs associated with those things explicit. Okay, I want to thank you for the back and forth. Thank you for hanging in to the fifth one. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the have a wonderful summer if I don't see you again, and maybe we'll be at this again next year. We'll see.